Welcome, Gunrunner.
One of the great what-ifs of Tremel-era Atari revolves around the best-selling Sega Mega Drive console and the story of how it nearly came with a Fuji symbol attached. Known to North Americans as the Genesis, this was the machine that dominated console sales across the world in the early 90s and knocked the seemingly invincible NES off its perch in the United States. This story has been long forgotten by many, so I thought now would be a good time to revive this story and unravel this fascinating tale of events. To start this tale off, we have to go back to 1988 and take a look at just where the console market was. Sega's Master System had bombed in North America, selling less than 2 million units and being soundly beaten by Nintendo. Not only had it been destroyed by the NES, but even more surprisingly so, it had also been outsold 2-1 by its other big rival, the Atari 7800 Pro system. So it should come as no surprise to learn that Sega promptly dumped their North American distributors, toy makers Tonka, and started looking for somebody with more experience and success in the video game arena. Step forward, Jack Tramiel and Atari Corporation. At this time, Atari were the number 2 player in the market, with the 7800, XC, budget-priced 2600 VCS, and 16-bit Atari ST, all vying for valuable shelf space. Sega wanted to use their name, reputation, history, and larger market presence to launch their new 16-bit machine in Atari's home territory. The new Sega machine was originally going to be named the Tomahawk. Yes, really, after Sega found that they couldn't use the Japanese name in the US. This is because somebody called Mega Drive Systems had already taken that name and trademarked it. However, the guys at Atari hated the name for several reasons. Not only did they consider it to be bordering on racist, remember this was around the time that Native Americans had become upset and offended about white Americans using their image and words for profit, for example the furore over the Washington Redskins NFL team, but they also felt that it had no relevance at all to gaming and parents might consider the name to be violent and not family friendly at all. Atari had just set up a new development studio in Lombard, Illinois, a quite unassuming town near Chicago. This office had been set up purely to create games for Atari's current home console range, but they were also asked if they could come up with some ideas for this new console, including a much better name. Ex-head of Atari Lynx development, Scott D. Williamson, who also programmed Stun Runner, Toki and Road Blasters for the handheld, went on to explain. Ed Schneider and I were originally hired to write games for the Tomahawk, which was the name that Sega had given to their new Mega Drive system in North America. From what I remember, Atari Vice President Larry Siegel had been brokering a deal where Atari would be the North American, possibly worldwide, distributor for the system and its games. Sega were looking for an aggressive American name for the console, and that's what led to the name Tomahawk. But nobody at Atari liked it very much, so we had an office contest to see who could come up with a better name. I think the prize was something silly like a steak dinner. Steve Rhino came up with the name Genesis. His logic was that it meant either the console that would redefine gaming or the after effect to start the Star Trek II movie. Either way, it stuck. The deal later fell through, unfortunately, and I don't know if Steve ever got his prize, but seriously, that is how the Sega Genesis got its name. Negotiations eventually fell through because Atari CEO Jack Tramiel wanted worldwide rights for the machine, while Sega were keen to hang on to Europe, having already been very successful there. They had previously set up a great relationship with Virgin Mastertronic in both the UK and France, which at the time were their 2 biggest markets, and didn't want to jeopardise that. The man heading up Atari's console division at that time was one Michael Katz. He was heavily involved in the negotiations and was so impressed with the Sega hardware that he actually ended up leaving Atari to join Sega as the president of their US operation after the deal fell through. Of course, they would eventually go on to launch the Genesis themselves, where Katz was also the brains behind the Sega Does What Nintendo Don't ad campaign that launched the machine into the spotlight and helped to snatch the North American market from the grips of Nintendo. There is no doubting that the negotiations must have certainly been in a very advanced stage, if Atari had even hired staff to write games for the console. Given what a huge success the Mega Drive and Genesis went on to become, it would have been interesting to see what Atari would have done differently. Would we still have had Sonic the Hedgehog? Would the 7800 have been dropped altogether? Would it have revived Atari's fortunes and put them back in the #1 player in the market? Even more excitingly, well, for me anyway, would have been Sega games like Outrun, Space Harrier and Galaxy Force appearing on the Lynx. Or would it have ended up being crippled with bad marketing and a distinct lack of developer support like all the other Atari machines of that era? Of course, all we can do is speculate on what might have been, but there's no doubting that this is a very interesting story from Atari's past, and Sega's for that matter, and one with more ifs and buts than you can shake a controller at. If you like this video and would like to see more like this, then please make sure you subscribe, hit that like button and support me on Patreon. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.